Today, everyone is talking about these men. Syrian jihadists fighting a war against the Bashar al-Assad regime, fiercely determined brigades. There's the all-powerful Islamic State, of course, but they are not alone. Lots of other factions are fighting on the ground. We obtained permission to follow several of the most hard-line of these brigades. Paramilitary groups, mainly Syrians. Some are made up of former members of Islamic State or of the Al-Nusra Front, close to Al-Qaeda. Several thousand combatants come together in factions around Latakia, Idlib, and Aleppo. Like the Islamic State, they're fighting a holy war. Like the Islamic State, they want to bring down the regime. And like the Islamic State, they dream of establishing a new caliphate. For all these reasons, the Islamic State and the brigades don't fight each other, nor are they allies. They cohabit. These jihad squadrons wage war relentlessly. We obtained exceptional permission to follow these men for 9 days. Both into combat and in their everyday lives. Never before have these men been filmed in this way. We accompanied these jihadists into the heart of the Syrian conflict, where we even saw a combatant blown up trying to bring down an enemy position. The northern suburb of Aleppo, June 2015. These men playing a pickup soccer game belong to Ansar al-Aqida, a very influential component of the jihadist rebellion in the north of Syria. These are the men we will follow for over a week. None of this would have been possible but for this man, Abu Muhammad al-Halapi. This 40-something with beard and glasses created the faction around 1 year ago. Before that, he was the undisputed leader in the north of Jabhat al-Nusra, a Salafist group affiliated to Al-Qaeda. A warlord with a bloodthirsty reputation, he is always in command, even here, when it comes to putting the ball in the opposition goal. According to several American sources, he was shot dead in a raid in 2012. As if by miracle, he lives again. Here in this Aleppo school, partly destroyed by the regime's bombing, the chief of Ansar al-Aqida, the followers of faith, established his headquarters some months ago. Commander and religious leader, this is the image he likes to put across. Every day, the same ritual. From 8 o'clock in the morning, Abu Muhammad and his men take lessons in the Akhem, an extreme reading of the Quran. The education is provided by one of their eminence gris, himself a jihadi veteran.
نذكر بكلام الله وبكلام رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ونحثهم على الجهاد حتى ايش؟ حتى يكونوا من المؤمنين حقا.
Religion and war, the two fundamentals of Abu Muhammad. He even wanted to appear in traditional Mujahideen costume at work in his office. It seems that the man is extremely distrustful towards journalists, as he soon reminds us.
تفاجأنا بأن المخابرات العالمية تعلم عنا الكثير. من أين جمعوا هذه المعلومات؟ فتشنا، بحثنا، وصلنا إلى أن عدد من الصحافيين طبعا الذين يموهون عن أنفسهم بأنهم يعملون في الصحافة كانوا مخابرات.
So why us? We met Abu Muhammad in 2012 in Aleppo at the beginning of the war, and we forged a bond of trust. We maintained contact since then, and a few months ago asked if we could follow him for a week. He agreed, because he wants to show who these combatants are and explain why they are fighting. Throughout this shoot, we must follow the rules he will lay down. The daily fare of the war we're about to experience is firstly the bombing. Just 4 years ago, Aleppo was the economic lungs of Syria. Now more than half the city lies in ruins. The threat here almost always comes from the sky. Barrels of oil or gas cylinders loaded with powerful explosives, and sometimes also scrap metal and combustibles, whose use is prohibited by the Geneva Convention. A bomb has just fallen in this neighborhood, now under jihadist control, but where many civilians live. Amnesty International says that over 3,000 people paid for the army's untimely drops with their lives, and that was just in 2014. The regime continues to deny using these lethal weapons, claiming they're only targeting the rebels. Here, there's only material damage. Barely have we arrived, then there's another alert in an adjoining neighborhood. This time it's a regime helicopter come to discharge several barrels in the Sukari sector. Casualties are heavy. 4 people killed outright, 2 of them children. Although 500 meters from the impact, this man's body was cut in 2 by the barrel's shrapnel. The scene we've just witnessed can be repeated up to 15 times a day, depending on the frequency of army raids. In this neighborhood of Aleppo, as in many others, intensive bombing inevitably favors the jihadist cause.
وانا قلت له امبارح سوار قلت له كثير بكير بده يطلع بضيعه لكن هلا بطريقهم بدهم ساعتين
اكثر على البراميل
ايه
اكثر من ساعتين
300 كيلومتر اكثر.
One of Abu Muhammad's men has invited us to his wedding. 2 hours to drive barely 30 kilometers. The many checkpoints and the state of the road are to blame. The groom, 23, is wearing his best suit. The context is never entirely forgotten. The wedding song includes a direct attack on Bashar al-Assad. As is traditional, men and women celebrate separately.
تخلص الفترة هاي راح يرجع إن شاء الله ويكفي طريق الجهاد. والمجاهدين يعني بكل سوريا ماشيين على هالطريق هذا وكليات نفس الروتين ونفس الكلام. حياة بدها تستمر، إذا في قصف ولا ما في قصف، وإذا في طيران ولا ما في طيران، بدنا نستمر بحياتنا رغم أنف بشار الأسد، رغم أنف النظام الغاشم.
The scene is surrealistic. These men are all combatants. Outside, the war goes on. The firing, at first thought to be joyful, in fact comes from a helicopter overflying the sector. We leave the barn to try to film the source of so much controversy, the helicopters that the regime is so desperate to hide. Spotting them is very risky and not at all easy. It is they who drop the barrels of death, here shown in slow motion. The first drop, and a second soon after, more than 1 kilometer away. Though quickly on the scene, the men from Civil Protection can only survey the damage. Three men have just lost their lives, buried under the rubble of their house. This one was caught in the trap. The Civil Protection men don't manage to revive him.
صار ثالث أسبوع في وقت صلاة الجمعة بيستهدف المساجد في قرية عنادين. بيجي الطيران المروحي بيستهدف المساجد. هذاك الأسبوع 14 شهيد، وهي الأسبوع 3 شهداء من تحت الأنقاض. ما بضرب غير على بيوت المدنيين، أطفال ونساء.
It's the end of our first day in Syria.
الله أكبر.
إن الذي تكرهون في جماعة خير مما تحبون في.
The following morning in Idlib, 80 kilometers southwest of Aleppo. In a discreet mosque, an 11-year-old is reciting verses from the Quran, inciting Muslims to wage holy war. This young boy is the son of the man in the red and white keffiyeh. His name is Abu Tawfiq, one of the most important warlords in the region. A jihad veteran, he learnt his trade in Afghanistan, in Chechnya, and in the Balkans. Today, Abu Tawfiq's stronghold hosts a highly important meeting, attended by all the chiefs of jihadist factions in the region. The heads of numerous groups that operate between Aleppo and Latakia all have the same objective, to establish Sharia law in an Islamic caliphate. High on the War Council's agenda is the question, who will lead the next offensives on the various fronts? Abu Tawfiq puts pressure on his men.
الشخصيات اللي من اول هلا ما استشهدت صارت عبء. ليش؟ صار عنده ايجابيات ظاهره وصار عنده سلبيات ظاهره. فهالسلبيات احسن ما انه يغطيها عند غيرنا، خليه يغطيها.
Abu Muhammad, our guide, is also present.
نقاتل بشار الأسد لأنه رافضي، لا لأنه لا يحكم شرع الله عز وجل. فكان اختلاف كبير بينه وبين باقي المشارب في الجبهة الإسلامية مثل الأحرار.
Sitting by them is a man who refuses to be filmed. He has a reason for that. There's a price on his head. Abu Muad el-Masri, alias Abu Muaz, is an Egyptian with an impressive pedigree. Wanted by the US State Department, captured in 2009 by the CIA in Afghanistan, and extradited to the USA and then Egypt, he was then released following the revolution that brought an end to Mubarak's reign. The meeting ends. As well as being a feared warlord, Abu Tawfiq is also a political strategist. He never questions the influence of the Islamic State in Syria.
الدولة الإسلامية هي يعني منشود كل مسلم وطلب كل مسلم، ولكن الحقيقة استطاع يعني الغرب والشرق أن يزف للمسلمين الدولة الإسلامية المزعومة حتى يضلل المسلمين عن مشروعهم، مشروع الدولة الإسلامية. وهذا الأمر لن يطول التضليل والتزييف عن غاية المشروع الحقيقي، لن يطول، وسوف تتجلى الأمور وتتوضح الصور بإذن الله إن شاء الله.
We are about to see for ourselves the determination of these men in the field. Here, Abu Tawfiq's combatants and other jihadists are leaving to attack a position held by soldiers faithful to the regime, in this case, Alawite militiamen. In this village, just 30 kilometers from Latakia, neither side will yield a meter to the other.
بس طول بالك ليه؟ هيك ترى في مناظرات
Scenes of unbelievable guerrilla violence. We soon find ourselves trapped amidst the bursts of gunfire from automatic weapons. One meter away from us, a bullet has just ricocheted into this man's mouth. Without medical assistance, he dies before nightfall. We take advantage of the short respite to slip away. The fighting continues and becomes even fiercer. As for the village, it finally falls several days later. At the wheel of a pickup, Abu Muhammad agrees to take us to a secret place in Aleppo where no camera has ever been before. At first glance, this looks like an ordinary mechanical workshop. But this is where the Ansar al-Aqida group and other factions jihadists daily produce explosives, bombs and munitions. The man on the left with the red beard is called Abu Layef. He's the chief of a brigade close to Ansar al-Aqida, the group led by our guide since this report began.
رجع مخرط بس شرار اجى من برا صمنا مسك
صمنا ولحمناه ونحن الطبات كنا لحمينه اللحام على الدولاب
مثل عادي
مو بزمان وانا هيك سويتهم
اجى جسرين عليه جسرين هيك نطبوا طب هيك صار عندي شخصيه يعني بدخل فيها وين ما
From dawn till dusk, these jihadists make grenades, as well as bombs, and shells. In this room, gas cylinders are prepped for fitting with explosive charges.
عبوا هدول برميل زد لهم بودرة ألمنيوم زهرة كبريت خلط لهم إياهم قالوا عم كلهم.
Each bottle is painstakingly cleaned out with sand to get rid of the gas. Then filled with powder. The bomb makers are equipped with smock and mask, precautions bordering on the ridiculous. Where do these weapons come from? Who finances them? There's no way of knowing. The technicians take a break for our camera. But the reality is rather different. The man on the right is a Syrian prisoner sentenced to death by the jihadis. Far from an isolated case. This entire war arsenal might seem somewhat homemade. But a trip to the front line is enough to see that they enable the jihadists to do a lot of damage to the enemy. We go with Abu Muhammad close to the port of Latakia, one of the most disputed front lines in recent months. Here, several jihadist factions have joined forces in a combined attempt to bring down Syria's fourth city, through which Damascus gets fresh supplies of weapons and essential goods. This combatant, barely 13, has just come too close to one of the guns that has just been used. Abu Muhammad and Abu Layef meet to coordinate operations. On the opposite slope, less than 500 meters away, a Shiite unit is given jihadists cold sweats.
بسبب أن عدونا عنده إمكانيات وعتاد.
The interview is interrupted by fighting.
مدافعنا فهي صنع محلي. صنع. الله أكبر.
Abu Layef decides to break cover in a bid to assess the enemy positions and rectify the aim of his guns. He is then joined by one of his men.
يا خاي السليلوز يلي جابه الزلمة الله يرضى عليكم والله يهديهم والله يحفظهم، فهذا الأمر غلط. أنا موقف السليلوز اللي جابه الزلمة لأني جدا بطيء جدا، بده شغل، قلت بده شغل.
It's an ideal position from which to assess the damage to the other side.
يلا خاي بسم الله بسم الله.
The target has been hit.
الله أكبر. هل رأيتها؟
It's almost twilight. In this war of attrition, which has gone on for months in the Latakia sector, the jihadists have forced their enemy back a few dozen meters. These men praying together have all been sentenced to death. As with Islamic State, in the zones they control, the jihadis have their own courts and their own prisons. This one, located in a southern neighborhood of Aleppo, boasts around 50 inmates. Soldiers captured in combat, deserters from the regime, and sometimes civilians suspected by the jihadis of espionage. Before being brought before the Islamic Commission, prisoners have an initial hearing in this office. This man is a deserter.
هلا ما عم يوصل التاريخ. شو التاريخ اللي بحكم اليوم شو
13 By asking these questions, the jihadist is trying to learn as much as possible about the other side. In this war, as in others, intelligence can be the key to victory. The interrogation is over. In the office next door, a civilian presides over the court. His knowledge of Muslim law, in other words, the Quranic texts that govern the application of Sharia, made him the ideal man for the job.
بعموم النص يكون الجاسوس له طبيعة، هل هي الطبيعة تخابرية لصالح النظام أم طبيعة المنفعة؟ إذا كانت تخابرية فإنه يعامل معاملة من تولى العمل معه.
A simple poster is a reminder of the severity of the penalty. This officer of the Assad regime managed to eject when his plane was hit by a missile. The jihadists accuse him of multiple offenses of dropping barrel bombs on civilian populations. He is facing decapitation.
السجن مو كويس. برا أكويس، الحرية أكويس برا. نعم.
وكيف يعاملك الشباب؟
الحمد لله كويس.
It's impossible for us to find out the real conditions of his detention. The only escape lies in prayer, as, barring a miracle, none of these men will ever again see the light of day. In certain cases, prisoners can also be used as bargaining chips, like this man on the right, captured 3 months ago on the front. On the phone is his father, a major in the regular army. With him, the jihadist on the left will negotiate his son's release.
Hello. شلونك؟ الحمد لله رب العالمين. شلون صحتك؟ الحمد لله تمام. ليش ما بدكوا تتصلوا؟
ليش فصلوك من الشغل؟
Negotiation has been bogged down for weeks. So the jihadist will give him a clear ultimatum. That's when the prisoner understands he may be living his final moments.
قدمت لهم طلب مشان مبادرة؟
حكيت مع المحامي.
ايه.
حكيت مع المحامي.
ايه.
قال لي بس بدي اعطيني اسم السنة 3 وصير ما بعطي اسم. لا ما كنت كده احسن اسم انا. ما عندي اسم عندي لا تاخذ الاسم.
ايه.
انا بدي خبرني ماشي انا بدي دورك.
يا حجي معك مهلة من هون لأسبوع. معك مهلة من هون لأسبوع. رديت لنا جواب رديت لنا، ما رديت لنا جواب يعني ترحم على أبنائك.
طيبين انتوا أكابر
لا ما لنا طيبين ولا لنا أكابر، إن شاء الله لنقيم عليه الشرع وحد.
جميل ولاد عالم وطيبين.
على الله. السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
لينا قدام رب العالمين وقدامك وقدام أهلك، وهي صار اتصلنا فيهم 3 مرات، صار لك أسير عنا أنت أكثر من شهرين، ولهلا أهلك ما اتصلوا فينا ولا مرة، وأبوك عم بكذب كذاب، لو حكي مع محامي ولو شيء، ومبين عليه إنه مع النظام ومع الخنزير، يعني سمانا بهنيك وكذا، الا شوي يقولنا انتم ارهابيين او مسلحين او كذا. المهم معه من هون لاسبوع، هذاك وقتنا حريه تصرف، او يتواصل معنا، ترجع بتحكي معه بكره وبعد بكره والبعده لبين ما تشوف حل. يعني إننا اخوه اسرى بدنا اياهم، ما اجوا الاسرى انت حكمك قتل.
It's a reprieve for the prisoner, but how long will that last? Since our arrival, we've been constantly surprised by the harshness of this war. We were almost as surprised by this totally unexpected slice of life. Brothers in arms, Abu Muhammad's men are all here, paddling in the water, bathing in this river. Contrary to what you might think, swimming, laughing and having fun aren't considered as haram, as a sin. That day, Abu Muhammad decided to grant his men a few moments' relaxation.
إن شاء الله في قلب اللاذقية، وعن قريبا سنأكل في حديقة العامة في مدينة حلب، في وسط مدينة حلب. I'm sorry.
The day is coming to an end. In the Latakia sector, our guide decides to inspect a rather special building site. The foreman, sporting an Islamic State headband, is called Abu Assed. The visit begins. What we're about to see inside will take our breath away. Built early in the summer, 6 meters underground, this tunnel was dug to take the enemy from the rear. After 2 kilometers, the enemy positions are right above our heads. This colossal project is kept going by 15 Syrian prisoners working 15-hour daily shifts, night and day. Appalling working conditions for these slaves, armed with simple pneumatic drills, who have to put up with more than 40-degree heat and a stifling atmosphere. When we questioned them, you could see the fear in their faces.
كنا عند الطغاويل عند النظام كانوا يسبوا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ورح نأتيهم بإذن الله ورح نعمل فيهم تفجير عملية استشهادية بعون الله تعالى.
إذا ما بنقدر نجيهم فوق الأرض إن شاء الله من تحت الأرض نكون تحتهم.
وبإذن الله رح ندبحهم واحد واحد.
In this tactical war, where each side tries to catch the other unawares, this shows that the jihadists are ready for anything. In the bowels of the earth, Abu Assed takes advantage of the presence of foreign journalists to challenge us on a subject dear to his heart. He is one of the few in the group to speak openly of France as an enemy.
عن نبينا عليه الصلاة والسلام وهم أخوة لنا ونسأل الله عز وجل أن نحشرهم في جنان الفردوس الأعلى. هم أخوة لنا أخي طولما أنت نبيك وربي ربك وإسلامي إسلامك فما الذي يمنع بيني وبينك؟ أنت أخي بالله ونسأل الله عز وجل أن يجمعنا في يوم واحد في جنة الفردوس الأعلى.
At the time of our visit, the prisoners had already dug close to 4 kilometers of tunnels. The ultimate target was 5. Almost 1 week at the heart of the jihad, and our amazement continued to grow. Just months ago, this zone was controlled by Islamic State. But its men were routed by other combatants, in particular the Free Syrian Army. We had heard that some Christians remained in the sector. We brought this up with our guides, and they brought us here to the village of Al-Kunaya. Built in 1933, its church is still standing. It's even regularly attended by 230 Christian families from 3 neighboring villages. For the past 15 years, Father Francis, an Italian, has officiated here. Recent events have changed nothing, even when the zone was held by Islamic State.
Hanno detto che noi possiamo fare tutte le funzioni nostre liturgiche, le nostre preghiere senza nessun problema, basta che non suoniamo le campane, dobbiamo togliere tutti i nostri segni religiosi che si trovano fuori, tutte le statue, abbiamo tolto la statua della Madonna, di San Giuseppe, di Sant'Antonio e poi anche le croci, che non possono vedere neanche croci, perché sono segni cristiani, le abbiamo tolti e così via.
The visit continues, still accompanied by the jihadists. Abu Layef and Abu Muhammad sit down alongside the priest and are very attentive to our interview. It's hard to know whether he was speaking under duress or not, but Father Francis showed an unexpected understanding of Islamic State.
estremisti è una parola molto larga, la mass media gonfia le parole. Quando stavano qua la ISIS, quando è stata qui, per noi era una era bella, una era tranquilla, una era di pace, perché tutti i ladri, tutti gli assassini, tutti i mascalzoni sono scappati via. Allora potevi stare tranquillo, dormire con le porte aperte. Ma veramente è stato un periodo molto molto buono. E come ti ho detto prima, eravamo di rispetto reciproco tra noi e loro.
It would seem that the rules haven't changed since the arrival of Abu Muhammad's jihadists and the other factions. Even for the jizya, the mandatory tax imposed on non-Muslims, they showed quite astonishing indulgence.
وفرض الجزية شيخ. فرض الجزية يأتي عند التمكين. هناك تمكين يدفع الجزية، لا يوجد تمكين لا يوجد جزية.
Our guide politely invited us to shoot the following sequence. We are back on the front line. In this people carrier are women and children, all armed. The jihadists made it a point of honor that we film this sequence. They are quite aware that these images are exceptional. This child, barely 12 years old and carrying a heavy weapon, struggles to pose for the camera. These women are learning to fight. Their actions are still very uncertain. The wife of Abu Muhammad, seen here on the left, has set up her own cell, Qaidat al-Jihad, the jihad base, though she is 7 months pregnant. Both bomb-making and weapons handling skills are learned in a practical setting.
إذا عملتوا هيك وأنتم ملتيين صار ضرب أو أي عبطة بتقتلوا بعضكم بدون ما تحسوا. الله يجزيكم.
خلي شغلة قدها لك تلقطها. إيه والله خلص.
On the 6th day of our voyage into the heart of the jihadi world, Abu Muhammad wants to show us something he feels strongly, that jihad is a family affair. He enjoys the moment playing with his 9-month-old son, though perhaps not quite the kind of games we are used to. The setting for the women's interview is carefully composed.
ما بخاف لاني انا بجوز انا وابني بالبيت ينزل فوقنا برميل او بجوز انا ابني بالبيت يعني بالسوق ينزل فوقنا صاروخ او قذيفه ما بخاف عليه. بعدين احنا هون عم بضربنا يعني اذا بتنا انا وابني رح نموت كرامه يعني عم نضرب عم بضربنا. وبعدين انا يعني ما بخاف على ابني لاني ياتيكم الموت لو كنتم في بروج مشيده يعني حتى لو وين ما كنت رح ياتينا الموت.
Abu Layef's wife is here too. Stolen image of an intimacy never normally shown. But what she doesn't know is that within 48 hours, her husband will no longer be of this world. One of the challenges facing the jihadists is spotting the enemy, who are often invisible. To this end, they've invested in a new device. In fact, they have just taken delivery of several drones. One of their men has just brought them back from Europe.
هذا برنامج إذا بركولة كول أحرار. هلا الطيارة هي هون.
This device does indeed have several functions. It enables them to drop small explosive charges, but also to scrutinize the regime's positions and its aircraft.
وهي اليوم هالشقة اليوم هذول تبع امبارحة هذول جرة في المباني وهذول تبع امبارحة طلع هاي. طيب بس هيك عم بشقوا بالسقف. وين الشباب؟
The reconnaissance is done. Now the jihadists will temporarily abandon this part of the front as a crucial battle awaits them elsewhere. For several weeks, the jihadists have been stuck in El Furaika, a small town 70 kilometers from Latakia. The regime has pulled out all the stops, sending the Air Force on bombing raids and reinforcing numbers on the ground. This tower in the background is the problem. Inside, there are army snipers. They've devised a plan to capture it.
No.
Aleppo, in the jihadi headquarters. The bomb makers have prepared a stock of shells ready to be sent to the front. Abu Layef coordinates all operations, but we can feel that there is something special in store. The emir reveals his strategy for capturing the tower occupied by snipers. His idea is to gain access and open fire on the enemy soldiers. And if this doesn't work, he has a plan B: to blow himself up.
كيف صنيعك وأنت اليوم يعني أمير هنا أنت تلبس هنا حزام ناسف ويعني سف لي الموقف بالله عليك.
والله يا أخي الحبيب سبحان الله نسأل الله العلي العظيم رب العرش العظيم أن يتقبل شهدائنا. سبحان الله والله يا أخي الحبيب الأمر اللي عم نمر فيه أمر صعب من المفاقات. فنحن هالكفار هالقنازير عم بتمادوا على أعراضنا وعلى أرضنا. فوالله والله والله ما جئناهم إلا بهذه اللحظة. والله أنه في جنود خرجت من أرض الشام إن شاء الله للأول، فمن سوف يخرج معي الثاني ليكون إن شاء الله انغماسي في هذه العمل إن شاء الله. سبحان الله نحن مجموعة من الأخوة إن شاء الله سوف نتقدم في عمل إن شاء الله إذا قام هذه الليلة في عمل انغماسي يضعضع النظام إن شاء الله في الداخل في نحورهم. بهذا العمل عمل والله إن شاء الله ما بك يا أسنان. سبحان الله سبحان الله. محمد جاهز؟ جاهز إن شاء الله. تكبير الله أكبر. تكبير الله أكبر. مين جاهز كمان يا شباب؟
Faced with their chief and our camera, everyone volunteers, even the prisoner. The fateful hour draws near. Some find it hard to hold back the tears. A final prayer together.
ثم ارجع البصر ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير.
Abu Layef goes off on his own for a long while. Then comes the time for farewells.
تكبير الله أكبر تكبير الله أكبر تكبير الله أكبر.
شيخ شيخ حلفتك بالله حلفتك بالله إذا قابلت رسول الله سلم عليه. حلفتك بالله سلم على رسول الله يا شيخ.
إن شاء الله.
الله أكبر
الله أكبر
الله أكبر
الله أكبر
الله أكبر
الله أكبر. السلام عليكم.
الله معك شيخ. منطقة جنة شيخ.
Next morning at dawn. Posted at the entrance to the village, one of the jihadist factions opens fire on the enemy to create a diversion. This is the final picture of Abu Layef, less than 5 minutes before he enters the building where the snipers are stationed. The suicide bomber has just entered the tower. We take up position in the building opposite. Finally, he opens fire. Before being hit by a bullet himself. So Abu Layef did resort to Plan B. The way is now clear for the jihadists to advance on the tower. What we find there is a vision of horror.
كل مصير خنزير من بشار الأسد هيك مصيره وبشار الأسد هيك مصيره.
الله أكبر.
Around 20 bodies lie scattered at the foot of the tower. We decide to turn off the camera. Aleppo, the final day of our tour. In the many neighborhoods that have fallen to the fundamentalists, their flag is flying almost everywhere. The first victims of this conflict that has gone on for more than 4 years are the children, abandoned to the perils of war, the bombs, and the chaos. Each day, this 10-year-old boy is doomed to wander the streets, looking for food and reusable waste. The day's harvest is meager, but losing hope isn't an option.
العالم كله عم بتموت أقدم أنا هذا الخبز عم ببيعه مشان أعيش وما في شي ناكل اليوم ناكل أوقات ما ناكل أمي وأبي مشتاق إليهم.
From the beginning of the revolt against the regime in March 2011, more than 220,000 people have died in Syria, 1/3 of them civilians, 12,000 of them children.